Hi, Film Addicts. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we have a very special guest. We have director Piotr Szkopiak. Peter is a BAFTA nominated director known for his feature films Small Time Obsession and The Last Witness, starring Alex Pettyfer and Michael Gambon. Let's welcome Peter to the show today. Hi, Peter. Welcome.
Hi, Marilyn. Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm obviously clearly now an official film addict, so thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Our audience is just so excited to listen to you. Can you let everyone know where you are recording live with us today?
Right, so I'm actually phoning you from Cardiff because I'm working on a BBC drama show called Casualty. It's a medical show. So I'm in prep at the moment. I'll be filming in a couple of weeks. I'm a filmmaker based in London. So I was born and bred in London, and that's where I live.
Oh, wonderful. So what's the weather like today in London?
Absolutely scorching. It was like summer today. It was, I think, this day was kind of one of the hottest days since 1968. So suddenly it was like summer. But I think in a couple of days it's going to go back to winter again.
Oh, wow. So yeah, we're at the very end of March 30th, or pre-recording live. So it was one of the hottest days in London since you said 1960. That's wild.
Yeah, something wild. I mean, the weather at the moment is all over the place, as you know, everywhere. So it was a bit of a surprise. So yeah, I was ready to go out in layers. And it was sunglasses, and it was kind of sunglasses and shorts weather. Absolutely.
Oh wow! So you're in the middle of winter in London, and then all of a sudden summer appears. It's like, hey, how are you? Yeah, I think we literally had no winter in LA this year. So yeah, but so most importantly, we wanted to find out about your incredible directing career. You are just fantastic, and I want to start with growing up as a kid. What was one of your favorite childhood films that you just loved?
I think I started off watching westerns and sort of war films because my parents used to watch them. So I was watching it as a kid. I was always watching sort of John Wayne films and sort of films like The Great Escape. And then I remember when I was 7 years old, I went to a small cinema in Inverness in Scotland. It was one of those, we were on holiday there, we were camping, we were sort of living in a caravan, and the weather was just atrocious. And so there really wasn't anything to do. So my parents we went to the cinema because they loved going to the cinema and loved films. That's kind of where I get it from. And we went to see Live and Let Die. So that was my first sort of James Bond film as well. And obviously on a very wet sort of Inverness afternoon, seeing a film like Live and Let Die, James Bond film, colourful action, to a 7-year-old, this was an amazing experience, and it's one that kind of, I suppose, sort of kicked it off. That's one I always sort of go back to because really, obviously, as a 7-year-old, I probably shouldn't have been watching it because it was too old for me. but that made a huge impression on me, and I'm still a big James Bond fan.
Oh yeah, James Bond is the best. Action and the lines shaken, not stirred, and the beautiful costume and beautiful women and just the charm and the grace and the evil villains. I want to ask you, did you have brothers and sisters? Did you play like spies and stuff after seeing James Bond?
No, but it was almost like it's especially for boys. It's a real kind of fantasy figure, and it goes off into adult life as well. And it's kind of, it just opens you up into new worlds. I mean, the thing about James Bond films, especially when you're younger or when you don't travel as much, you're opened up and you're seeing worlds that you haven't got any experience of, and it's that globe-trotting aspect to it that was always so much fun. And on top of that, the action, obviously, for a kid, the action was fantastic. And so, not so much, my brothers and sisters were a lot older than me, so I didn't really play with them because my brother's 8 years older than me and my sister's 12 years older than me. So I was always the one sort of lagging at the end. I was always the annoying little brother, who came last. So kind of, I grew up on my own, sort of playing on my own. And what was interesting was, I remember now, is I used to always play with soldiers, with toy soldiers, and set up sort of big scenes with making hills out of pillows and covering them with blankets and setting up sort of forts or little towns, and then having having sort of battles all over my brother's sort of floor or up in the attic, wherever I could find a space. And I remember there's a photograph, I think, of Steven Spielberg sort of low, looking down at all these soldiers laid out on the floor with his kind of cap on. And I thought, there you go, I was doing that when I was a kid as well.
Yeah, we were
so, I always remember that.
We were storyboarding with our little action figures and toy soldiers, our little dolls. We're storyboarding and actually making little movie scenes, playing out there. Yeah. So that's wonderful. And so delightful, that treasured memory that you went with your family to the cinema, and probably on a hot day. I remember like the nice cold air conditioning, those nice plush seats, and just so excited to have the theaters opening back up. And many first dates on movies. People were like, that could be my first date, at the movie theater. So
yeah, I mean, I still get really excited about going to the cinema. I think it's one of those things. I think the day I don't get excited about going to the cinema, then something's got to be wrong, or I've come to the end. Because I still that moment where you buy the ticket, you sit down, the lights go down, and the curtains open. It's still as much of a thrill now as it was when I was a kid, and I don't think that will ever change.
Yeah, really fun, especially, when it's a big action film or special effects and you're just like, wow, look at that, zoom, zoom. Like I remember Back to the Future, the flying, and just so fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an experience like no other. And so, there's this ongoing debate about cinema and streaming and there is room for everything. As I say, at no point can one replace the other. We've gone through this so many times that sort of TV will replace cinema, then DVD will replace cinema, now streaming will replace cinema. But the point is, there's nothing like going to the cinema and sitting in a darkened hall with total strangers and having a mutual experience. However big your screen at home is, however good your sound is, you're never going to have that moment of actually going out and sitting in a room with total strangers and having a shared experience. And it is magical, and I think it'd be a shame if we lost it, but I don't think we ever will, because it will always go. It will always go on.
I think so, especially families that have kids. You're like, hey, grandma, can you take the kids out and go watch a fantastic animation film? They're like, the mom is like, I'm going to go do my hair or go get pampered while you take the kids. There's always going to be someone that's like, oh, can you take the kids and go watch a movie? You know what I mean? And
yeah.
So it's going to lead me to ask you, was there a favorite Criterion film that you just was a favorite movie of yours that you just might have inspired you to go into filmmaking?
When I was looking at the Criterion list, there's some fantastic films in the collection, but one that I landed on was The Long Good Friday, because I was born and bred in London. So Bob Hoskins, The Long Good Friday, again, I'm a young boy. It's all locations that I was aware of. It was very much kind of, a Londoner's film, and it still is. And it's almost become a period piece now. But as a kind of young boy growing up and into films, again, that was a huge experience for me, because when you're watching Westerns and American movies, that's one thing. That's a world you're opened up to. But then when you see a sort of gritty London film that's kind of, where it's been shot, it's always very exciting. So that was a huge influence on me later on, and even now, to hark back to the kind of films I like and the kind of films I wanted to make. And obviously the representation of where you live as well, because there's the one thing of the James Bond idea that you travel to places that you've never seen, but there's also something about, telling the stories that are outside your front door. And that's a different experience.
Yeah. And so you grew up in London. What city or street are you allowed to reveal?
I'm a South Londoner, so I'm south of the river, and there is a big difference between being born north of the river and south of the river. Don't tell me what it is, but we're all very protective of where we were brought up in London. Everyone likes to kind of mark the fact that they're either a South Londoner, North Londoner, East Londoner. And they're and they are kind of different cultures and a different London. South London was a newer part of London, and it's more leafy. It's a bit more open. There's a lot more kind of housing there. whereas North London is the older part of London. Obviously, the city of London is so much older. The East London are the docks. So there's always been different cultural sort of differences in and around London. But I'm a very proud South Londoner. As I say, I was born in South London. And because my parents are Polish as well, we also have I have an immigrant influence as well. So they came to London after the war. And the Polish community is and was very strong in London.
Oh, wonderful. And they have a similar thing in Italy. I don't know if you know, I was born in Italy, but they have the people from the north and the people from the south. And I too, like you, am a southerner in Italy. So yeah. And I don't know about you, but when I remember my mom's brother was driving us to Bologna, and they have these cute bread. It's like they look like little figure, like little like men figure bread. It's the shape of like a little stick figure. And I remember because our license plate said that we're from the South, the police made all the people from the South drive around because we weren't from the North. And I said, why are we going this way? And he explained that, like, I guess the North and the South were kind of like, different. So it's amazing how, like, hopefully that, like, even though everyone's different, we can all be respectful and kind to each other, because respect and kindness is a two-way street, because people are different. And from the things they eat to the religion they practice to what they love and where they're born, and people are different. So, but at least, I mean, that's one of the things I guess with movies can highlight the beauty of people, or spotlighting things that like, that just make people be aware that we can, all can kind of be kinder to each other, but it's a two-way street. And but yeah, but just the differences of where you're born can make you go, well, I'm a northerner, I'm a southerner. And it's just our differences. But we do love finding and exploring different cultures and going around the world. Like you said, James Bond shows like Russia. I remember, oh, wow. And with their skiing down the slopes, I didn't even know that existed, and the beautiful costumes. But it's really lovely when we can come together and enjoy each other's differences. And what a beautiful thing that filmmaking does.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And it's one of those things that I suffered with as well, because I was born in England, but my parents were Polish, and Poland was part of the USSR, so the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet bloc. A lot of people in England when I was growing up didn't even know where Poland was, or what Poland was, that Poland was a country. So I felt very much a kind of outsider from that point of view. And because everything at home was Polish, but everything outside of home was English, you kind of did feel that cultural conflict of, well, what am I? Am I English or am I Polish? And I still get asked that question, am I British or am I Polish? My blood is 100% Polish, because both parents are Polish, but obviously I was brought up in England in an English culture as well as a Polish one. So it's now that I agree with you that yes, I'm very different, but in a good way, because I can be Polish when I want to be, English when I want to be, and I also understand both cultures. So I'm richer for it, rather than having to decide one or the other. I'm different, but different is good. Different is not bad.
Yeah, different is good. I love it. And perhaps you're a British.
Well, it is, it's funny, because I was drawn, again, without knowing it, I was drawn to films like The Godfather, Mean Streets, Once Upon a Time in America. And obviously the common ground there is obviously immigrant communities, but in America. The Italian Americans. Obviously, there's a strong Polish American community in America as well. So, that was always there, even though I wasn't kind of aware of it. And as I say now, that's what makes me different as a filmmaker as well. And that takes me back to what we were saying before, in that, what is it you're wanting to say as a filmmaker? And obviously, I have a very unique and specific background, and that is what you bring to your work, overtly or not overtly.
Yeah, and I think that's why people like certain directors and writers and actors, what they bring to the film, just their backstory. And especially as a director, you will otherwise we'll get the same thing all the time. Like we'll just get there's so many comic books that are being made into films, which is great. And there's always the remix, sequel 1 through 10 or whatnot it is. But to have original content come out and beautiful stories, I think that people will always love original content and beautiful stories because, you know, we are different and we like to see we like to see a variety of things. So thank goodness that we have Piotr Szkopiak to represent his Polish heritage, his British heritage, his British, and which leads me to ask you. So, was there like one or two favorite directors that you love, and could you share like some of your favorite film shots? Because we love learning about directing, and from a director's perspective, would love to hear, you know, how you would describe a scene in a film as a director.
Yeah, I mean, the one I always keep going back to is a very simple shot, but it's obviously part of a sequence, and it's something that really influenced me. It kind of, in that moment, I suddenly realized kind of the power of filmmaking. And it is from The Godfather, and it's a very well-known scene because it's the scene where Michael Corleone is in the Italian restaurant, and it's the moment just before he shoots the Solozzo, the gangland boss, who ordered his father to be shot, and the corrupt policeman. So the shot that I always remembered, even as a kid, before I even knew what directors did or so on, was he comes back from the bathroom, he sits down, and the Solozzo starts talking to him in Italian, but you don't see Solozzo, you just hear him, and the camera just tracks in slowly on Michael as he's deciding what he's going to do. And then you also have the sound of the train that gets louder and louder and louder as the shot tracks in on Michael. And then the train cuts out, he gets up and he shoots them both. He walks out of the restaurant, the music kicks in, you know, and it's just, I mean, even just talking about it, it's just, I get emotional about it. It's just great. You know, from a filmmaking point of view, to me, it uses all the tools. And now that I've directed for so long, you realize, you know, you want to use all the tools at your disposal, not just the actor, the lighting, you know, the movement of the camera, the sound, you know, the music, the way they use the music in that scene, and also just visual storytelling. If you go back from that shot, you know, the whole sequence up from when he gets up from the table, goes to the bathroom and comes back, that's purely visual filmmaking. And just the way you see Al Pacino act it all out, you see the worry when he can't find the gun, and then he finds it, and then he kind of got to settle himself, and now he comes back out into the restaurant, he sits down, and now, boom, what's he going to do? And I mean, it's just, I know what happens every time, and I'm still tense, I'm still on the edge of my seat as to what's going to happen. Maybe you'll decide otherwise. So that's the strength of it. That's the power of a shot, the power of a sequence, and the power of kind of visual storytelling.
Yeah, and Scorsese, I mean, wow, just mind blowing how he really such a visual storyteller and so genius with the train, the sound getting louder and louder and tracking you know, Michael Corleone while he's talking, and it's just so genius and so many beautiful, amazing shots in that one film. That one film.
Well, you know, I mean, and this was also, I remember Francis Coppola at this point was a young director, and this is like his first big chance. And, you know, you had the likes of Coppola and Scorsese and Spielberg, all young directors, you know, learning from Europe. And obviously we know how they got their break. But just the talent there, the kind of the natural talent that they had. Yes, they were all film buffs and they knew their filmmaking, but to actually then apply that and create something new and original that has now stood the test of time and is a new classic is phenomenal. I mean, that was a phenomenal period of time, but just the natural talent of these directors at the time, which we're all, you know, I think every generation of directors will learn from, you know, as you go on. It's just the craft. It's that thing of watching craft right there, and you can analyze it, watch it, and then try it out yourself.
Oh yeah, and yeah, that was Coppola. I think I said Scorsese because I also like Scorsese when he does his films as well, but that was Coppola. Sorry, I didn't want to confuse anyone.
Yeah, but you're right, because I say, you know, when I was growing up, it was almost like they were also visual. So I didn't even know what directors did at the time. So I saw Mean Streets. I saw, you know, you saw Jaws, Close Encounters, The Godfather, all these films. And at that point, they were all films that I liked, but I didn't link them in any way. And it's only when you realize what directing is that suddenly, well, actually, all these favorite films are by this director, or they're all the same directors popping up, or the same actors popping up. But the main thing was the same directors were popping up. So I had my list of favorite films, and then I realized, well, actually, most of them are directed by either the same guy or this group of guys. Yeah. And that's what was fascinating afterwards. I came to it, later, once I realized what directors actually do.
Yeah. And when you are directing, do you weigh heavily on storyboards, or do you do a combination of using the storyboards and then when you're actually in the physical environment, let it breathe its life as well?
Yeah, when I started directing, I was very precise. I would plan everything. I would do camera plans, and in a way, I was kind of forced to do it because TV that's what they ask you to do, because you work in studio, you work on location. So it was a good discipline. I never storyboarded because I just can't draw. But then I realized Nork and Scorsese and the others, because whenever I saw storyboards, I thought, well, they look like comics. So I obviously can't draw as good as that. This is before I realized you actually have storyboard artists do it for you. So yeah, I used to do sort of stick figures for myself, but it's very time consuming. I planned a lot. So I would plan camera shots, but then I wanted to kind of be there on the day and see everything together. And I still do that now. I plan as much as I can, but I leave the final kind of decision to when I'm on the floor. Because you're right, when you see the actors there, how they're going to play it, you see them, in the location or in the studio, then those shots kind of appear as well. You'll see things that you may not have imagined. So I kind of want to leave that final decision as to which shots we actually shoot till the last minute, absolutely. And that comes with experience as well, because when I started, I was a little bit more insecure and I wanted to try certain shots. So I would maybe sometimes try and force the narrative into what I wanted to do, whereas now I'm much looser because I'm kind of confident that if I get the blocking right and the performance is there, the shots will find themselves, really.
Yeah, and are there like a standard shot list that you like, the basis that you can kind of just share with the new filmmakers that you start with? Like, the establishing shot, the close up, the medium, the wide shots. Is there a standard kind of thing that you need on each different scene?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't really have a standard, and it's suddenly if I have a style, the style is that I don't have a style. And I think every director will say the same thing. They never think they do have a style. It's always someone else will observe their work and say, oh, you use a lot of tracking shots, or you use a lot of handheld, or you don't move the camera a lot. How I started was, what I liked was I would just approach every scene and think, what is the best way to shoot that scene? If the best way to shoot that scene is in one shot, then I would do that. But if the next scene, I felt that the next scene should be really fast cut and handheld, I would just do that. So I wouldn't kind of think, well, I did that one in one shot, so maybe I should do this one in one shot as well. If it didn't suit it, I would shoot it in another style. Now, the danger of that is that when you get into the cutting room, the whole thing just looks a mess, because, there is no continuity in style, if you like. But what I found is that if I've made the right choice for that scene, if I've shot it the way, that works, the whole thing works. And no one really notices, because I think the main thing is, as a director, is you've got all these tools that you're using, the frame sizes, the lenses, the lighting and so on, the costume, the sound. But it's all meant to be invisible. You're not actually, if someone comes out of one of my films and says, that was really well shot, I'm kind of worried, because what they mean is it probably wasn't very good, but they like the way it was shot. To me, they should come out and say, that was a good film. That made me laugh. That made me cry. It made me want to know what happens next. I think that's the job of the director. And if then afterwards they then say, oh, and it was well shot. Oh, and actually the music was wonderful. But it's a second. It shouldn't be the thing up front. So it's that thing of not wanting to show off as a director, but also wanting to be visually interesting. So a long answer to a short question. I have my kind of toolbox, and in there you've got wide shots, you've got tracking shots, you've got handheld, you've got extreme close-ups, and you pull out the things that you think suit that scene. So, and having watched lots of films, classic films, and you watch how people do scenes in one shot. You see how directors do things when they're fast cut and handheld, and you're just learning from, the thousands of films that have come before and the good directors. So it's a hard question to answer is what I'm saying, because every director also has to find their own way, because what works for me doesn't mean that'll work for a novice director. And in a way, what I did is kind of what I read Scorsese, De Palma, Coppola did, was they would watch other films and nick from those films and create their own style as a result. Because obviously, famously, Brian De Palma was a Hitchcock fan, and he would just, almost wholeheartedly nick sequences from Hitchcock and do it in his own way. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think all artists are constantly taking what came before and then moving it forward. So that's kind of how I see myself, really.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, we're gonna do two parts, but so I'm just gonna give you a heads up. We're gonna come back for part 2 with Piotr Szkopiak. But I want to ask you, Peter, how has drones affected your filmmaking? Are you using a lot of drones right now?
Yeah, I literally had been on location today, and we were discussing drones. And they're just another kind of tool in the box. But again, I would not, for instance, because drones are being used, I will do everything I can to use drones. It's there. I know what it can do. I've seen a lot of good shots with drones. But again, if it suits what I'm trying to do, then I'll use it. But I'll also not use it because there's a lot of films that overuse drones. Your classic thing of something comes out and everybody's using Steadicam or everybody's using a drone, and everyone gets a bit sick of it. And a drone shot when you see one, but they're there kind of almost to show off, but they're not there to actually tell the story.
Yeah, like sometimes when I see a beautiful, like a car's driving on like a windy road, and you can just see it from above there, and you see the locations and the cliffs, and like there was a van driving along the coast of California highway, and it was so pleasant to just watch it drive along the cliffs, and you could see the water and the ocean, which was really stunning. So yeah, some scenes, like you said, you got to pick and choose your toolbox, your tools, and your toolkit, right? So but
yeah, and that's what drones have done for us as filmmakers, is obviously given us the helicopter shot. It's obviously a lot cheaper to hire a drone than it was before to hire a helicopter and do those shots. So you can do those very kind of expensive looking driving shots, establishing shots now very easily, and that's great. That's great for everybody, because as you say, you can then see so much more, and you put so much more on the screen and just create that world. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's very interesting that drones save money, like you said, with the expensive helicopters, so it reduces the budget, and then also like going from film to digital also saves on the budget. So there's a lot more people able to get into the business of filmmaking, and so I want to just maybe we'll end right here. And everyone, please tune back for part 2 with Peter Szkopiak. Peter, can you say it correctly so that like everyone knows how to say it correctly? Szkopiak. Yeah. So he says it so much better than me. So join us for part 2 with Peter Szkopiak, and we'll be right back. Thanks for listening for part 1, and come right back for part 2. Thanks everyone for listening, and see you for part 2.